Welcome to Tap Into an Expert, the podcast where we sit down with industry experts to get answers on all the questions you should be asking. I'm your host, Eric Sheinkop, and today we have a very special guest with us on the podcast. Joining us today is Drew Cashmore, a seasoned expert in retail media with a remarkable track record at companies like Walmart Connect, Firework, and Vantage. Drew has played a pivotal role in transforming retail media strategies, and we're thrilled to have him here sharing insights with us today. So welcome, Drew. Your bio is too long for me to go through. I'd love for you to introduce yourself and a little bit about your background and history, including working at Walmart Connect.
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate the invite. This is an exciting opportunity. So I'll back up to the early days. I started at Walmart in 2009 to build a small advertising business to offset the cost of e-commerce. This was in the Canadian market. We didn't really have advertising experiences on the site. And so we introduced advertising, and that became kind of the impetus or the precursor to true retail media. We scaled that business pretty substantially in the Canadian market. And then I was asked to move to the US in 2017 as part of that leadership team that would ultimately create Walmart Connect. So I joined there in San Francisco. We managed everything from the insourcing of the business, change management, the overall sales strategy and go-to-market, and the positioning of the business overall. Built that for several years, and then I joined a company called Firework, which was live shopping in the retail space, SoftBank-backed company. Managed that for a couple of years as their CMO, and then I've recently joined a company called Vantage, which is an orchestration layer for retail media. So we think about how does all of this ecosystem come together into a holistic platform for retailers.
That's awesome. So let's back up. Before we get into any of the questions, you said that what you initially did in Canada for Walmart was you were trying to build an ad unit, an ad division to offset the costs of e-commerce. What does that mean? What are the costs of e-commerce that you were fighting against?
Yeah, I mean, last mile delivery is a very expensive proposition. And so in the early days of retail and retail media, we found other ways to drive profitability in the business because we simply couldn't pay to deliver goods to people's homes, even if they offset the cost of shipping. And so retail media and advertising kind of grew out of that. It was a profit center to pay for the building of e-commerce solutions.
Well, especially in Canada, you got to be hiking those packages way out there.
Yes.
But that's very cool. All right, so today, what we are going to explore is the current landscape and future of retail media networks, particularly in the United States, which, according to eMarketer, are projected to reach $129.93 billion by 2028.
Very specific number.
Yes. And that accounts for nearly a quarter of all total media spend. Now, what I think is fascinating, you were here with us. You were the first guest ever on this podcast on your birthday. It's like getting your birthday twice in a year to sit down and do it again. But we didn't even get to air that episode because of how quickly this industry changes. We were very much doing the 101s, and we were holding that episode back so that we could build the collection of the podcast and then put it all out at once. And half a year later, the industry has already evolved so much that many of the things that we were talking about or guessing either didn't happen or happened in a way that was totally unpredictable. So as we look into understanding the retail media networks and what's going on right now, we want to start by unpacking the explosive growth that we are seeing and the potential of retail media networks. So according to WARC, global retail media spending is expected to reach $153.3 billion this year. That's going to be the reports coming out shortly. And that's growing 13.7% year over year. So can you give us an overview of the total addressable market for retail media networks? How are they thinking about it when they get into this? And how have we arrived at this point of tremendous growth from going from something that's just supposed to offset last mile delivery to looking at taking a quarter of all advertising media dollars spent?
Yeah, it's pretty spectacular. And I think on your point about the speed of this industry, because of that incredible growth, you're seeing a lot of stop and starts, and you're seeing a lot of strategies that are really more of a proof of concept. And so it's going to continue to change over time. And I think we have to be very cognizant of all of the noise in this space and figure out a great way to weave through that all. The TAM, if I think about the US market specifically, the TAM is anywhere between 80 to 110 billion that I've seen of late. And those numbers are, to your point, they're growing spectacularly year over year. But when you take out Amazon and Walmart, you're looking at only about 13 to 18 billion being spent for the rest of retail. There's a lot of retailers clamoring for that dollar. And so the TAM, the true TAM in retail media outside of the two largest players is in the realm of about 50 million per retailer. But I do believe, and we've seen a lot of data to suggest that the total addressable market over the next few years is going to exponentially increase. And so there's opportunities with small, medium business. There's opportunities with a lot of fraudulent ad traffic online that is going to need a new home. There's opportunities with in-store and how does that come to life more holistically. And so it's to say that what looks like for most players a small piece of the pie, if we can build this thing properly for the rest of retail over the next 3 to 5 years, that they can capture an incredible amount of upside.
You spent 13 years at Walmart and developed the retail media business. But again, that was for a very specific, we need to offset this cost. During that time, now it was 13 years, most of it was in Canada, and I'm assuming they're not on the same calendar. It's more like the loonie where it's like partial years, I'd imagine. How'd you see that perception shift within retailers of thinking, oh, this is not just something to offset some costs? And how has it evolved over that time from the beginning when you were first given that assignment and thought of how do we tackle it, turning it in over 13 years, turning it into Walmart Connect and seeing that opportunity of what was really out there? What changed internally? And was this something that the executive team, the C-suite immediately jumped on and saw as the opportunity that it is today?
I think part of the impetus for a much bigger view of retail media was Amazon. And when you look back at the time, Amazon was growing their retail media business pretty substantially. It represented the lion's share. And you could see that even though Walmart was the largest retailer, leaps and bounds, that the dollars that advertisers were spending were primarily going into Amazon to help grow their business. And so that became generally a competitive threat. I would say that in the Canadian business, until I left, it was more thinking about it as a profit center. I spent about 5 years in San Francisco building Walmart Connect US, and that we looked at as a flywheel that not only went to support the business of our advertisers, but it was a mutually beneficial flywheel that supported growth of the retailer overall, as well as growth of our client partners and advertisers. I think the way to think about retail media today is a flywheel that drives traffic and engagement into a retailer and drives engagement once they're there. And then that ultimately perpetuates the cycle and grows the business.
What I also think is amazing is when you were on this podcast last time, we talked about there used to be a handful. There was Amazon, Walmart, Target, retail media networks. And then all of a sudden there were 60. And now there's hundreds. And there are seemingly new ones popping up every single week. So how do you see that competitive landscape evolving? And especially what's the play for smaller retailers? Can they actually get a piece of these retail media dollars? Or is this going to, look, I got to spend my money with the Walmarts of the world because they've got a much bigger footprint? Or is there an opportunity for the smaller local shops to participate as well?
I certainly think that's going to evolve. Today, there is an initial entry that is a migration of dollars that are already being invested in that retailer. And so that's to say that retail media, by another name, shopper marketing or trade marketing, exists in the ecosystem across all of retail. And if you walk into any store, be it a regional or up to a Costco or a Walmart, you will see advertising at point of purchase in a physical environment. And the same is often true for the website. So there is a moment in time where we can start to migrate those dollars into what we call a retail media business and make them smarter and make them work harder and make them more measurable. But I think over time, if each individual retailer is selling to a Procter & Gamble or a DeWalt or a Sony, that it'll become too cumbersome for them to actually manage that spend. And so the evolution is likely going to merge into the big guys and or the differentiated players. So the retailers that have a unique product set or a differentiated offering or a certain amount of scale. You'll see those being able to have a direct relationship with advertisers. And then you'll see the smaller players either falling into a network or having to find something that is truly differentiated in their narrative to stand out.
Retail media networks have been able to take away dollars from the traditional advertising media companies by saying, we're going to target the exact right shopper with the exact right message at the exact right time to help with that conversion. So something that obviously is able to play a role in that world is AI. It's been the hottest topic at the beginning of the year. It's definitely been fizzling out a bit. But what are you seeing when it comes to AI in the retail media network space? Are you seeing its implementation? Do you have any examples of the way that it's been able to be used, especially to effectively enhance targeting capabilities or optimizing ad performance?
There's certainly value coming from AI. I think that the challenge that we have with AI in this space is twofold. One is that retailers have been slow to adopt it at scale across all of their data points. And so without the right data set into an LLM or whatever they're using, you're likely not getting the value out of AI that you truly could be right now. They're also apprehensive to just share data into something that they don't understand. It's a black box from their perspective. And so we're going to take time to get this there overall. The second piece of this, and this relates to retail media in a big way, when we launched our retail media business at scale and we were really trying to figure out what were the things that were going to drive growth in the business, one of the core pieces of that was change management. How do we effectively engage with our merchandising teams and store operations and so on to drive the business forward in a meaningful way? And that meant a lot of encouraging and training and engagement overall. It's something that AI needs right now is proper implementation and change management within the organization. Moving forward, the thing that we have to remember is AI is going to be really good at helping us communicate with customers, but it might not be as good at engaging with them from a visual standpoint. And so we have to be really personalized and thoughtful and creative on a continuing basis in terms of how do we engage with consumers once we know who they are and know how to engage with them.
Yeah. I mean, from my perspective, creating content for commerce, the right message, it's important, and AI plays a huge role in getting that right message in front of the right audience at the right time. But the audience never is going to want an AI message. It's never going to want that AI content. They need to see the functions of the product from a real human to be able to actually convert. So I 100% would agree with you. And when it is adopted, being able to have it more pointed to where it's going to be able to create value is going to be a challenge, I think, because it's very easy to get distracted because it has been such a hot topic.
And that becomes a differentiating factor moving forward. The ability for a retailer to tell a highly creative and custom story in an emotive way is going to differentiate those that are just going to throw something into an algorithm and expect results.
So, and that actually brings us into segment 2, which is innovations and strategies. So we want to explore the innovative approaches driving success in retail media. eMarketer forecasts that U.S. retail media search ad spend will reach $76.83 billion by 2028. So that's growing double digits over the next 4 years. You've mentioned that retail media networks started as a way to offset e-commerce costs, but have you seen the role of retail media networks actually evolve into growth engines for the retailers overall, not just as a new revenue line item, but expand the presence or the footprint of a retailer? I mean, Walmart's earnings came out today. and crushed it in the way that they are embracing retail media? Do you think that's at play in helping them become a stronger overall retailer?
It's certainly a very powerful growth engine for any retailer that's doing this right. The way to think about it is a retailer by itself will have a finite amount of dollars that they will be able to invest in marketing. By introducing retail media into their business, it at the very least dramatically expands their capacity to invest by taking dollars that would have been spent in the market on behalf of those brands and repurposing them to drive traffic and engagement into the retailer. And so the way I think about this flywheel is an advertiser will pay to drive traffic into a retailer that will ultimately grow traffic in the business. The dollars then are repurposed or create engagement and content opportunities on the site where people are shopping or in the stores, and that ultimately drives the business. And so you see this growth engine that comes from retail media that is not new to retail. Advertisers were investing in things like flyers and circulars and coupons to this point, but I think it's a lot more efficient and it works a lot harder and it's a lot more measurable. And so the dollars that advertisers are investing in this today and the platforms that retailers are building to support it will ultimately drive their mutually beneficial growth.
And with all that growth in the space, I mean, you've said this before, retailers are going to have to differentiate their retail media offers because it is impossible for brands. How are brands going to be able to say, well, you're all offering the same thing, but you all want my money? What ways can they differentiate?
Differentiation or growth in the future is going to require two core things. One is make it easier and more appealing for an advertiser to buy. And two is making it easier for a retailer to operate. So in the first piece of it, related to easy and appealing, it's about compressing or condensing the amount of places that they need to activate in order to deliver a marketing message at the retailer. So today what happens is you get this very fragmented technology stack within retail media, and a single advertiser or the retailer on behalf of the advertiser has to plan campaigns across multiple touch points. Low visibility, low inability to measure campaigns across touch points, and a lot of potential breakpoints. On the second piece of it, about more appealing, it's about creating differentiated or opportunities to really, really stand out. And so certainly you mentioned data on the growth of search within retail media, and that will grow as far as people are searching in retailer sites or on retailer sites. But beyond that, there's some really creative solutions like what the Desire company is building that offer a differentiated experience for customers. And I think the way we need to think about retail media moving forward is how do we create unique and engaging experiences for our customers that drive both their general joy in shopping with us and ultimately drive growth for us and our advertisers and suppliers.
So segment 3, the future of retail media. Retail media is expected to account for 23.5% of all digital advertising in the US in 2025. That's a quarter of all digital advertising spent with retail media. That's according to Advertising Perception. So Drew, what emerging trends should businesses be watching in the retail media space? They're being asked to shift their budget, take 25% of their overall digital advertising spend and put it into retail media.
I mean, that's spectacular when you frame it that way. I think the things to think about are the things that I'm really excited about. Start with video, which is obviously huge in your world. We haven't really figured out video in retail media yet. And you're seeing a couple of different paths for this. One is CTV and essentially augmenting connected television data with transactional and retailer data to make TV advertising stronger. The second is retailers haven't adopted video on their site for a myriad of reasons, but that opportunity overall is massive and is going to really fundamentally change how e-commerce sites convert. One of the things that we know about video specifically is that it works a lot harder than images to drive a conversion. One of the things we know, and Eric, I think you know, is that authentic video from real people changes the engagement level and it changes the capacity or the desire to convert in a significantly greater way than just having video as a baseline. And so you're going to see an evolution of retail sites to be much more dynamic and engaging, structured against video. And that's one of the pieces I'm really excited about. The other is just simplicity in buying. And we talked about this before, but I think you're going to see a consolidation in technology and a simplification of the buying model to make it ultimately easier for advertisers to partake in retail media at scale.
Yeah, I mean, that consolidation is such an interesting question because you said earlier that brands are able to effectively manage about 6 retail media networks simultaneously. So the implications of that, it's really hard to get your head around, because what does that mean? That brands are going to have to start being exclusive to certain retailers where they put their money. Otherwise, they're going to be shelved in the back. So if you go into Target, you've got Coca-Cola, but if you go into Walmart, you've got Pepsi, and it's hard to find one of the others. How do you see that point of only being able to really manage about 6 retail media networks? How is that going to be driving this? That's a limitation. How is it going to be driving consolidation in the industry?
You're certainly going to see the big players or the differentiated players stand out. So the retailers that have somewhat of a unique product set or a unique customer base or offering. But you're right. This is going to be really hard for retailers 20 through 100 to truly stand out and truly create an offering that warrants a direct relationship. And so you're going to see supply-side platforms come into play similar to the programmatic space, whereby retail audiences or retail websites are opened up to open exchanges, and you as an advertiser can buy across multiple retailers. You're going to see networks be created around retail media so that you can buy multiple retailers in one, or multiple audiences that then farm out to multiple retailers. And then I think the key thing that people aren't truly factoring in today is innovation within individual retailers. And so to the extent that a retailer wants to own a direct relationship with their advertisers beyond differentiation in their assortment or audience, it's about product. It's about delivering a phenomenal advertising experience for your customers and for your advertisers that is truly differentiated in the market. We know that Best Buy is doing that today with the Desire Company. We know that there's a lot of opportunity out there for things like video to be introduced effectively within retail and retail media. But differentiation on the product set is going to be a big innovation, I think, moving forward.
Yeah. And what do you think the role or balance of on-site and off-site retail media evolving means in the coming years? I mean, when we started placing video on retailers' websites through their retail media network, initially it was only on the product page. Now they're upselling it. So those videos are living on connected TV. They're living in app. They're living on QR codes. They're being upsold to be used as traditional advertising would use content. What's the right balance? And when you started this with Walmart, was your thinking only on site? Was it on PDP? Or were you thinking we should buy amplification of ads on billboards, on TV shows, on TV commercials, on radio? What's that balance look like for retailers?
On-site was a core priority when we started retail media at Walmart. And I think that continues to be so moving forward. That's ultimately where a lot of the margins are. And being able to engage with someone at point of purchase is very, very important and very meaningful to the advertiser. In-store is obviously something that has existed for many, many years, but is gaining new traction. And retailers are excited about how we effectively consolidate that space into retail media and make it work harder and make it much more measurable. And then the offsite component is a opportunity to drive traffic in and create engagement with a known audience, but in multiple places across their buying journey. And so it serves, I think, to extend or augment the value of digital advertising today by placing it with real transactional and real customer data that makes it work harder. But I think it's one of those things that retailers are still truly trying to figure out.
And that's one of the challenges. So segment 4, challenges and opportunities, because where there are challenges, there are always opportunities. But a report from the Association of National Advertisers reveals 88% of brands feel somewhat or heavily influenced by retailers to buy advertising on their retail media networks. So we see this directly. You know, I've talked to brands where they're like, I have a relationship with Pinterest directly. Why would I buy media through this retailer for my content to live on Pinterest? Like, I don't want to do that. But they have to kind of play that game. Retailers aren't able to say, well, if you want to be seen at all when somebody comes into the store, you got to write us a check. It's got to be for particular advertising opportunities. But the pressure is real on these brands. So how do brands navigate that pressure to advertise on retail media networks? And how do they even know they're getting real value versus just being told, hey, you're going to have to spend with us if you want us to carry you?
I will tell you candidly that over the last 6 months or so, have felt like I didn't truly have a grasp on the feelings and wants of the advertisers themselves. And so I had focused most of my career and attention on helping retailers build retail media businesses without truly thinking about what do their clients need and what do they what will make them buy more. And what I've discovered is this frustration with a perpetually growing ask. And so every year a retailer might come back and say, hey, I need you to increase your spend with me by X amount year over year. I think if the ask for brands and advertisers is just that, it's spend more with me without me providing you any incremental value of any kind, advertisers should be wary of that. We really need to find within retail media new ways for retailers to warrant asking for incremental investment. I wholeheartedly believe that this industry and the ecosystem that all of us have built is of extreme value for advertisers in general. This is closest to point of purchase. In lieu of anything else, that is a really, really important component, closest to point of purchase. But in order for us to continue to grow, we need to continue to show new and incremental value and truly help our advertisers understand the value and deliver real insights and ultimately grow their business.
And they will, right? Like the retailers will figure out innovative ways, a lot of the things that you've been talking about, differentiated solutions. So what is that impact on traditional advertising channels? How do you see that playing out in the future?
You're seeing a lot of traditional media players or publishers breaking into the retail media space and partnering with retailers. And so that's one of the interesting things that I think is worth mentioning, that the advertising ecosystem is not taking this lightly, and they are thinking about how do they evolve their business to play properly with or play nicely with retail media investments. And so you're seeing generally publishers and maybe more traditional media places become a lot more data focused and a lot more helpful in terms of driving driving sales at retail or driving engagement at retail. You're also seeing content plays that are more shopping heavy. And so, shoppable content within CTV or within publisher sites that kind of merges the idea of traditional media with shopping. And I think overall, we'll see real innovation around how retailers and publishers go to market together. And frankly, maybe even some acquisitions in that space.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting. I mean, this is the biggest threat to the advertising industry that I've seen in my lifetime. I mean, possibly since television advertising took over print. I mean, this is a completely scary time for some of the traditional advertising media agencies out there. So it is interesting to think about how they're starting to work together and embracing that change. Learning from, my background in the music industry. And when digital came out, all the record labels started trying to sue anybody who was downloading music, and instead of embracing it, and it put them years behind. So it's really an interesting thought about how do traditional advertisers embrace what's happening. That change is coming. So how do they play and keep a piece of it? So all of this being said, what advice would you give retailers who are looking to launch their own retail media network in an increasingly crowded space?
I like what you just said, and I think that's really important. We have to take this seriously. We are seeing a foundational shift in budgets and in advertising investments into this retail media ecosystem. This isn't something that should be a side job. This is something that needs to be very thoughtfully integrated into the retail business model of the future. And it needs to be built, frankly, in a way that drives value for both the retailer and its advertising partners and its customers. And so moving forward, my advice to anybody diving into retail media at this point is take this business seriously and invest in it and think about this as a core driver of your flywheel moving forward, as opposed to something that is a side project for the business.
Yeah, I love that. And that brings us to our final conclusion questions, the expert's corner. So I'm going to rapid fire a couple questions. Tell me the first thing that comes to your mind. What's a strategy that everybody's following that no one is questioning?
Connected TV.
What's a trend you think will be on the decline or even dead within the next year?
The flyer, circular.
What's the one thing everyone in your industry is afraid to admit?
That this thing is really hard.
What's the most controversial opinion you hold?
That we're in a stall right now for most retailers, and that there's a lot that we need to do to break out of that stall for retail media investments.
If you had to bet your career on one prediction, what would it be?
I think you're going to see a consolidation or a collapsing of the discovery engines and the retail e-commerce platforms into one. And so think of a Pinterest, but a true shopping experience. And with that, a proliferation or a need for a lot more authentic video-based content. And this is the piece that I'm excited about related to the Desire company, is that moving forward in the future, you're going to see a splintering of shopping behaviors. One is going to be very AI-driven and kind of programmatic. And the other is going to be authentic, relationship-driven, experience-driven in digital environments. And so my bet is that there will be a large-scale discovery shopping-based engine in the future.
It's very cool. I'm excited for that time. So as we wrap up, always wonderful to speak with you. I'm always getting valuable insights. It's a very complex, exciting world of retail media networks. So Drew, thank you very much for being here. Are there any final thoughts you'd like to share with the audience about the future of this space or what's happening today?
No, Eric, I appreciate what you're doing and everything you're driving for this space. And I think it's incredibly important. So thank you and keep up the great work.
Yeah, well, thank you. So what we heard here today is, I think, probably one of my favorite things that I've heard is just be real about what's happening and embrace it and think about how to differentiate it. And if it's not going to serve the consumer at the end of the day, don't do it. So, I heard a lot from you when you were giving advice about what can retailers do to get in this space. And at the heart of everything that you're saying is it has to be a better shopping experience. If it's not, no brand's ever going to want to spend that money with you. Their wallets are being pulled in a million different ways right now, in a million different directions from big brand name retailers that they need to appease to get that visibility. But they have to choose at the end of the day what's actually going to help get their product in the hands of more consumers. So when it comes to retail media, that's what it needs to be all about. That's what needs to be at the heart of this. So Drew, again, thank you very much for all your insights, contributions. If you want to connect with Drew, he's on LinkedIn, Drew Cashmore, linkedin.com/Drew Cashmore. So thank you to the listeners for listening to Tap Into an Expert, where we tap into the experts for you. And if you want to learn more, visit thedesirecompany.com. Thanks so much, Drew.
It's a